Well, I was born in Colorado City, West Texas. My dad was with the phone company, and so for a year or so, we were out in Big Springs, Colorado City, out in West Texas. That's where they both came from. My mom is from Spur, my dad from Dublin, and but they got here as soon as they could. They knew as Hurst was just beginning to, I don't know if it was exploding at that point. There were probably about 5,000 people when we got here in the mid '50s, but they knew that this is where they wanted to raise their kids, and they never moved. Well, I remember not moving into, but living in the house where my mom still lives in Southhurst. My dad and my mom and I moved here when I was 1. And my dad passed about 5 years ago, but she still lives independently in the same home that we moved into just off of Redbud Park back in 1956. My mother's family, much of it in Comanche County, so De Leon, that's where a lot of them were from. My dad, from Dublin, for generations. My grandfather, that I really didn't know, he died when I was 5, but he was marshal there in Dublin. And then even as I grew up, we spent a lot of time there. My dad and my uncle had 140 acres between Dublin and De Leon, with a couple of tanks on it. We did a lot of fishing, a lot of camping, a lot of hunting, and so we spent a lot of time where both my parents' roots were. Down in Dublin in West Texas, he fought in the Pacific Theater during World War II. I've got his bayonet still from when he was on a transport ship and would transport those the troops back and forth from island to island there during World War II. Yeah, never really would talk about it to us, which is true of many of them. It was pretty traumatic for him. He was on board when a Japanese plane, a kamikaze, hit the side of that ship and killed several of his friends, and it shook him up. And he really didn't want to talk about it with us much. Dad, it was with a phone company for 43 years, but occasionally would work with my aunt and uncle over in Euless in a store they had, and then ran cattle on that 140 acres. So those cattle, raising those cattle, number one, we ate really, really well. We had a freezer outside in the storeroom that he always kept stocked with fresh beef, and then him running that cattle is really probably what put me through Baylor. And Baylor was a lot less expensive back then, but it still cost. And he named it after the 3 kids. I was the oldest, and then 2 years apart. There was Jeff, and then Jenny, and then Jill. And it was the Triple J Cattle Company. And we ate well, and I went to Baylor because of those cattle. It was a great place to grow up. There wasn't a whole lot at that point, but we could. It was Hurst was kind of the Mayberry of the Metroplex, because everything centered around school, community, church. Kids we'd ride our bikes forever. We'd go fishing, we'd go hunting. We would just, it was a great, great place to grow up for my 2 sisters and I. There wasn't a lot of things to do. And so, we did church, we did school. I played Pee Wee football. My sisters took piano, and that's just kind of what you did. My earliest memories when we lived not far from what is now Highway 10, and there was a Piggly Wiggly, there was a Ben Franklin, there was a shoe store, and we would walk. We'd go down there. It wasn't too far from the house. But I recall when Bel Air Shopping Center opened, we'd hit the big time. Part of that, if we wanted to go to the movie, we would have to go to what was the old Richland Hills Center, and there was a theater over there. But when the Bel Air opened, we were big time. I remember my mother would drop us off, me and my 2 younger sisters, and we would go to the movie. Cost us $1.05, 35 cents a piece. So I think she gave us $2, and we got to go to the movie all afternoon, see a couple of movies, and have popcorn and Coke, and have a great afternoon. 3 of us for probably a total of about $2. Neighborhood kids, we would just get on bikes and just go. I know, for example, back in the 1920s and maybe even into the 30s, one of the largest employers, maybe for anyone living in Hurst, was down in the gravel pits in the Trinity River bottoms. But for us, it was an adventure that Pat Fletcher next door and I and a couple of guys down the road, we'd just get on bikes, we'd take our fishing poles, and we'd go down to the gravel pits and we'd fish all day long. And finally, if it would start getting dark, we'd probably need to head home and have some dinner. But we just rode bikes and went everywhere. There were no concerns. There was no fear. Everybody was looking out for everybody else's kids, and that's just what we did. My mom stayed at home with us until we all got grown or out of school, and then she went to work for Jimmy Morgan. Dr. Morgan was pastor at First Baptist Hurst. I used to mow the parsonage when the Morgan family lived there. Jimmy Morgan developed cancer on his throat and had to resign the pastorate, but had a national radio ministry, and my mom worked for him for probably 20 years. Of course, right down the street, C.A. Sanford, C.A.'s restaurant was the first really full-service restaurant, and I think it was Jack Taylor's drive-in was right up on the hill, and so they were within just a few blocks of each other. They both went to First Baptist, and there was always this big rivalry. C.A. had gone to SMU, and Taylor's Drive-In, the hamburger place, was he was a big Baylor fan, and so every year there was an annual rivalry. And I'm not really sure what all they had to do when one lost, but there was some friendly competition going on between the two of those two restaurants and those men that fed us really well growing up here. At that point, I guess it was just the Hurst-Euless school district. Bedford came on line, I think, in '58, but that's when really things began to mushroom. First through 12th grade, HEB ISD. There was no kindergarten back in those days, but West Hurst was where I started school. In fact, my first grade teacher, Linda Butler, I was in love with. I couldn't wait for Fridays when we got a hug from her at the door as we left for the weekend. And then my fifth grade. Gary Giles was my teacher then, and after my fifth grade year, they married. And so two of my elementary teachers at West Hurst married and are still to this day dear, dear friends, still living in Hurst and great contributors to this community. A lot of good teachers growing up at West Hurst. George Clark, who looks a lot better than I do today, he and Bob Briscoe were my seventh grade football coaches. And George Clark is still vice principal at Trinity High School. Bub Down was the ninth grade head football coach at Hurst Junior High at that time. And Bub, was Mr. Down, or Coach Down, had taught me at Sunday school at First Baptist, I guess in fifth or sixth grade. And I still remember taking a knee and him coming out to talk to these newly arrived seventh graders. I still recall then. Today, him speaking to us as we were starting a football career that never really was very good, but we had a lot of good times under Coach Downs. The district was growing so quickly back then that they'd take half my friends away. We were at West Hurst Elementary when they opened Donna Park, and so I lost half my friends there. And then they opened up Bedford Junior High, and a third of our class went to Bedford Junior High. Well, Jana was a Central Spartan, and then became a Bedford Broncos. She was the first ninth grade class. In fact, the first year the school Bedford was not ready, and they had Central Junior High and the new Bedford Junior High had to share the Central campus, and so she would actually go at night to school, late afternoon into the evening, and for I guess the first semester, both Central and Bedford students were meeting on the same campus until they actually could open up the new Bedford campus. But after Hurst went to Bell High School, some of the greatest times of my life. Had a wonderful, wonderful experience. Playing football on the annual staff. Got to be president of student council my senior year. Best thing about Bell High School and Mrs. Brown's English class, when I was supposed to be conjugating verbs or something, I'm looking across the room at Jana, my future wife. And so we were high school sweethearts, fell in love there. And I remember the first sort of date we had. We were part of National Honor Society, and it was Valentine's Day, and we were taking gifts to children over in hospitals in Fort Worth. And then after that, being the generous man that I am, I took Janet to Poncho's, and we dined well that evening. But Bell High School was a great, great time. A.J. Sales was principal. Football, we were not good. We were not good at all. Coach Davis was a great coach, but in fact, Coach Davis, to this day, emails me every Monday. and tells me how and what he is praying for me, for my family, and for our church every Monday. And he was my coach many, many, many years ago, Bell High School. Oh man, we had Sadie Hawkins, and there was this large, and I technically did not want to know what was taking place, but we wanted to do a greased pig contest, but we didn't have pigs. So I'm not calling out Billy Smith and Doug Barwigan, but they did make arrangements, and what particular farmer they borrowed that pig from, and then that pig was returned all greased up. That farmer probably wondered what in the world that pig had gotten into. Well, it had gotten into about 2,000 students at Bell High School trying to track it down and having a hard time. But yeah, Billy and Doug provided that for us when I technically did not know anything that was going on. Friday nights after we lost a football game, which is about every week, we would cruise up and down Bedford-Euless, and there's a Jack in the Box today on that same corner of Bedford-Euless and Hursteview. And now it's been remodeled and redone multiple times since that. But that's where we would congregate. It was old Gibson's store was there in that parking lot, and that's where we would all kind of hang out and just run back and forth all the way up and down the streets. There were several game changers, in my opinion, that helped shape the city of Hurst, at least when I was growing up. You had the arrival of Bell Helicopter in the early 50s. Now, technically, it's in the city limits of Fort Worth, but everybody knows it really belongs to Hurst. And it was huge in terms of employment. I mean, I remember during the Vietnam War and the height of that, there were probably about 11,000 employees there at the Bell Helicopter plant. And it seemed like everyone in the church, I grew up at First Hurst, everyone in the church either worked for the school district or Bell Helicopter. And it seems like I remember that during the summer, I don't know if they coincided with the weeks that they kind of shut everything down, and church was like a ghost town because everybody vacated because everybody worked for the school district or for Bell Helicopter. So Bell Helicopter was a huge game changer. Then obviously the arrival of what was then TCJC, now TCC, in the 60s. I remember my dad working at the phone company would go to night classes. I don't know what he was taking, but he was improving himself and trying to improve things for our family in his work. And then with the 70s, you had the arrival of Airport Freeway and Northeast Mall, and those developments radically transformed the city. I headed to Baylor. With the exception of my first 2 years there, I came home every weekend so that I could see Jana. And then I'm not recommending this, but we married after our sophomore years. I said, okay, you figure out a way that we can live. My dad said we were going to live on love. You figure out a way we can live, and we'll get married. And so that's exactly what she did. She went out to old TCC, got her medical lab technology associate's degree, and went to work at Highland Baptist Hospital in Waco. In the evening, she would go to class at Baylor in the morning, would have lunch together, and then she would work the night shift. It paid a little bit more, and that way she put me through Baylor, and then I became pastor down a little church south of Waco about 6 months after we got married. And so I pastored, and she worked at the hospital, and we did Baylor, and that's how we got started a little over 40 years ago. After we finished Baylor in 78, moved back here. First Baptist Hurst was gracious enough within the first few months. I came back here to go to seminary, Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and I spent a long time because I came on staff at First Hurst, but so I ended up between my master's and my doctorate degree spending 11 years over at Southwestern. I had tenure probably over most of the professors at that point. It took me so long to get out. But First Hurst brought me on part-time for the first couple of years, and then it moved into a full-time associate role. I did that for about, 13 years. With the grace of God and the patience of these people, they called me as pastor, and that was almost 26 years ago, and they've been a very, very patient people ever since. There's a church in the little community of Bransford, which is now part of the Colleyville Grapevine ISD. There was a little community of Bransford that sent out these pioneer missionaries to the far reaches of a community called Bedford back in about 1880. and the church was there, constructed a building for maybe about 20 years or so, and then I don't really know the details. I wasn't there, but shortly after the turn of the century, 1900, the church was relocated from Bedford to Hurst. And the stories get a little muddled, but Uncle Billy Hurst, our namesake, the namesake of the city, maybe both, but either donated the land or donated the horse and the wagon, and they literally took down the church in Bedford, plank by plank, put it in the wagon, drawn by the horse, provided by Billy Hurst, and brought and re-erected down on what is now Highway 10. That became at Hurst Baptist Church at that point, and later First Baptist Hurst. But the namesake of the city was significant in the very roots of the fellowship that I'm privileged to serve in today, a long, long time later. My folks took me to First Baptist Hurst when I was 1, and I've been there ever since. I don't know where it is. It's at the house somewhere. There is a certificate of promotion from the 1-year-old to the 2-year-old departments, signed by the then Sunday school superintendent, C.A. Sanford. And so I've got to find that and have it framed. So, yeah, my spiritual heritage is obviously tied up with my family and the fellowship known as First Baptist Hurst. It's just been a part of my life, all my life. Probably my love for children and later my involvement with doing children's camps and being on the school board can be directly traced to the love my parents have for kids. They taught Sunday school probably between a combined 75 and 80 years at First Baptist Hurst. Still today, First Baptist Hurst has a ministry down in the Bel Air community on Tuesday nights. And we got about 120 kids that come out, and we do organized recreation and Bible study and snacks for the kids. My mother, I'm not going to say how old she is, but my mother, not in great physical shape, she uses a walker everywhere she goes, but she's there every Tuesday night. Now, most of those children are speaking Spanish. She doesn't speak a word of Spanish other than Taco Bell, but she speaks the language of love that those kids respond to. And so still today in her 80s, she is loving on kids. And she and my dad did that and modeled that for me all my years growing up. Growing up, at least that I recall, you had First Baptist and First Methodist. And it seemed like everyone was involved in one of those two churches or some of the other smaller churches around. And I believe I say this frequently. For example, back to the school district, because it's HEB, but Hurst is tied up in that. That I believe one of the great reasons that this school district is what it is, and I think the same thing could be said about the community at large, is because of the strong Christian character that it is woven as a thread through the history of HEB ISD, of the city of Hurst, those in city government, those in community service. They came from churches and from a perspective of faith that I think gave direction to value and integrity, a future focus. The city of Hurst, for example, has always been progressive. But so much of that arrived, I think, out of a sense of faith. Jesus was pretty clear about being salt and light where you live. And I believe that has been characteristic of the leaders of this community, of the school district, because of the great fellowships of faith that we have. And again, you started out with those, but then St. Philip's Presbyterian, Peace Lutheran, again, Bellevue Baptist and Shady Oaks Baptist, great congregations that the emphasis upon family, upon faith, as it radiated through this community, I think made a significant difference of who we all became and the foundation that it provided for us. Some of the best experiences of my life were my 15 years on the HEB ISD school board. I was prompted, Larry Manier was stepping down, so there was going to be an open spot. I was prompted for really two reasons. One, I had a debt of gratitude that I needed to pay back to this community. Again, Jan and I were both educated here, graduates of Bell High School. Our children, Brooke and Blake, were graduates of Bell High School. Our first two grandchildren were going to school here before they got outside of the will of God and they moved up to Hazlitt. But this school district, it helped shape who I am, shaped my family, generations of our family. So I had a debt of gratitude I needed to pay. And then again, going back to my parents, my love for kids, I'd rather hang out with kids than adults any day. And so my love for kids, it was instilled within me from my parents and how they invested with kids all those years, prompted me to run for the school board. And in those 15 years, they were magical. There's an outside, not state evaluations, but an external group, Educators Resource Group, that evaluates the top 200, the 200 largest districts in this state, based upon financial efficiency and academic achievement. And my last 6 years on the board, and I assure you it had nothing to do with me, because the board works collectively with the superintendent. But those last 6 years on the board, and it's been true now, I think 11 out of the last 12 years, out of 200 largest districts in the state of Texas, HEB is number one. And that's remarkable. That has a lot to do with the leadership. It has everything to do with those classroom teachers that are on the front line. Has everything to do with our kids. Because these kids come in, many of them from all over the world, they walk in not being able to speak English. The schools have changed a lot. Our clientele has changed a lot. And frankly, for the better. In fact, the school district has a slogan that we are different by design. And there's real truth to that. The value that we have of the diversity of literally the world has come here. Again, I'm 5 years removed from the school board, but approximately, when I finish up, there's approximately 200 countries in the world. HEB ISD has students, the last time I checked, not their parents, not their heritage, but these children were born and came from about 120 countries all across the world. There's about 74 languages other than English that's the primary language spoken in homes here in HEB. So the world has come here, and we're better because of it. HEB has always had a reputation of being among the very best, innovative, forward-thinking districts, just like the city of Hurst. What I said about the school district, likewise is true, and we've been blessed. Nancy Welton served on both the school board years ago and now is on council. Lorraine Tataravich, that I have the privilege of serving with on the board, served also on city council. So there's a lot of overlap there, and the same, I think, philosophy that we must continually be getting better. We cannot rest upon our laurels. There is more to do. In fact, in HEB, they still allow me to speak at a lot of events, and almost always I will end with, in HEB, the best is yet to be. And I think that's true for Hurst. A lot of the people in this project have been highly influential in my life. Carl Jones taught me in Sunday school when I was in 8th grade at First Baptist Hurst. Was obviously a significant leader in the district when I came on the school board. Pat May, I frequently introduce her in various events as the queen of HEB ISD. She rules and reigns out of a heart of grace and love, but she really is the queen of this place. Mark Siri and Mark is just a perfect example of so many things. I mean, the boy's in church more often than I think I am, so a man of deep faith, a man of a committed family, he and Sherry and the girls. As a businessman, and he is the epitome, I think, of business that is service-focused over at Mr. C's. What they do, my mother, unfortunately, has me for a son that can't do anything mechanical or technical, and so what does she do? She goes to Mr. C's, and Mark Sirier takes care of her. It was a highlight to get to go to CA's restaurant. And his chicken fried steak to this day, unparalleled. But CA helped shape North Texas. CA served, obviously, as mayor here, later as city manager over at Northwestern Hills. I mean, he developed Iron Horse Golf Course. CA changed the face of this community, as did Bill Souter. Bill and Dodie, because Dodie's the one that made it work. But I remember, my mother would allow me to go if she needed some stamps from our home to the old post office there on Harmon Drive. And I would walk, and when I would walk in, there would be this icon, dark-haired, good-looking postmaster, Bill Souter, that I would see in church on Sunday mornings, but then I would see at the post office. And then obviously Bill became, I'm sure, the longest-serving mayor in the city's history. He shaped everything. I remember we did a roast for Souter when he finished years ago as mayor, and I attributed the fact that Hearst was the recipient of not only Bell Helicopter and Northeast Mall, but Bill Souter was also responsible for getting the Pony Express here. I mean, he had been here shortly after God arrived. You talk about those pioneers. I mean, the Arline family. You've still got the cemetery here over by Bel Air Shopping Center, and the Sextons, and then the Souters going back. And what they did, I mean, going back to the 1870s, I guess, 1870s, 1880s, and then working their way up. But there's always been individuals that are willing to serve and sacrifice for the sake of the community. It's what has made this place what it is. You got the same thing in the school district. You had some Charles Wages and Forrest Watson, and then Dr. Kalos, Dr. Buinger, and now Steve Chapman, and great leaders. People that are extremely visionary with value, and individuals are willing to serve and sacrifice for the good of the whole. David Moon was my Sunday school director at First Baptist, obviously when I was in high school. Well, David, huge community leader, was served on the school board for 12 years, served as president of HEB ISD Board of Trustees. And when he encouraged me to run. So David helped me get on the board back in the 90s. Well, David, long before then, for 30 years, had organized and coordinated what's called Santa USA. And it started out of the back of a pickup, but very quickly, partnering with Bell Helicopter, it became the means whereby Santa, Mrs. Claus, Rudolph, Frosty, and all the characters would fly in helicopters to all the elementary schools in HEB. Now, at the end, David was probably making about 100 stops throughout the Christmas season, all across North Texas and beyond. It was unbelievable, going to nursing homes, Wish for Wings, into hospitals, but focusing upon children and those that maybe didn't have anyone else to reach out to them at Christmas. But David did this for 30 years, and for 25 of those years, I was his number one elf. Number one, because I'm kind of the size of an elf, and some of these kids think that I've been around hundreds of years. But we had a great time, and we would get to go into all the schools and fly in. And it was, with the exception of being the last day of school, is every child's favorite day. But other than that, it was the day that Santa would fly in on the helicopters, right before Christmas break. One year, many years ago, I was wearing still one of the original costumes. Been doing this, it was probably about 20 years old at that point. And so Jana got up early with me and used old safety pins to try to keep those. There were no suspenders, and whatever elastic had been in the waist of those pants had long worn out. Jana is trying to pin me up so I will stay together throughout all of these stops. Well, back then we tried to do all HEB schools in one day. So we're running late, and there was early dismissal. So school's out at noon. And unfortunately, we're arriving at the last school about 12:30. So it's crazy. You got 1,000 junior high students come out. They're too cool to really admit that they want to see Santa, but they want to see Santa. They remember from being in elementary. And you've got 600 or 700 students on the blacktop. You've got parents. You've got the police that have stopped traffic everywhere because Santa has arrived. So Santa's on my left. I'm on his right. I've got Santa's bag in my left hand, and I'm waving to everybody with my right hand. And that's the way we're doing it. And we go across Martin Parkway, and suddenly my pants are around my ankles. One of the most embarrassing moments of my life, and I will tell you, this is now 15 years later. Those children, all now young adults, many of those are still in therapy from the tragedy that they experienced that day when Santa's elf lost his pants. It was a bad day in the name of Santa. or at least Santa's elf. We do beach club at a couple of the schools after school, and last year I was doing the lesson, and it was the day that we were giving Bibles to all the kids. Beach Club Bibles are very kid-friendly. It's a great experience for them. And so, talking about the importance of the Word of God, I take some of we have antique Bibles, the display at the church, and so I'm taking these old Bibles, and I'm taking my Hebrew Old Testament and my Greek New Testament, and then I have a little New Testament, and I'm telling them the story of how these were distributed to soldiers during the Civil War. And I'm being very reverent and spiritual about this. And as I'm showing this little New Testament from the Civil War, there's a little third grade girl. Honestly, what she asked was, "You were in the Civil War?" Which I don't know, puts me about 175, I guess. Jan and I walked into this marriage over 40 years ago, knowing we could not have children. And so we had the blessed privilege of adopting two. We adopted both of them through Catholic Social Services, which at the time was run by two Baptist ladies. It was great. But our kids grew up here and had all the benefits of going through the same schools that we did. And Brooke was, I remember the first year she tried out, she did not make Raiderettes, and I was ready to have somebody's head. But you don't do that when you're on school board. But then the next year, but I so admired the fact that at that point she could have given up, but did not. And the next year went and tried out, and some of her greatest times, and a daddy's greatest times of being with her in Red Race. In fact, I recall to this day the opportunity I had to be in the daddy-daughter dance at halftime one of the Bell football games her senior year. And the dancing on part of the dads, especially this one, was really, really bad, but it was a great time to be with your daughter. And Blake was a pretty good athlete and fast, unlike his father. Ran cross country and did really well at Bell. And then Alan Mendenhall, who's still there, Blake loved German. And Alan even arranged for Blake to be a part of a cultural exchange where Blake got to go to Germany and play his guitar and sing. So again, people invested in my kids, helped shape, and supplemented what we try to do in the home, what we all try to do in our homes. And then when you have the same values and similar servant-minded people wanting to invest in kids' lives, it's a great, great place to raise a family. One of the great, I think, characteristics of this community is its love for kids. It's always been that way. Whether it was the Bub Downs or the Tom Gilmores or the Olga Greens teaching me in Sunday school at church, or whether it was the Ted Doses, the Dick Hills, the Pat Kays that coached me in Pee Wee football, all the way through school. The educators, but just a love for kids, I think is one of the hallmarks of Hearst, and it still is today. And I think it's probably the togetherness that has made this place so unique. It's not one individual. Our church is not driven by an individual. This community has not been driven by an individual. It's people working together. And doing so effectively has created something very, very unique, a modern-day Mayberry in the Metroplex. I really believe what we continue to do at this community will continue to be a really jewel in the Metroplex and an example for so many across the state and beyond because of the visionary leadership that we've always had, I believe that we have now, and will continue to be developed in the future. Because, again, as I say with the district, in HEB, the best is yet to be. The same thing is true in this city. She's been great for a long, long time, and she will be for a long, long time yet to come. And it's all because of the people. Visionary people with great values, willing to serve and sacrifice for the greater good. And they are individuals of faith in their God, in the future, and confident of what we can accomplish together. Hearst has done that really well. And I believe it will continue to be so long into the future for generations yet to come. Dabo Swinney is the head football coach at Clemson, and he has a different theme for his team every year. After they beat Alabama for the national title, the theme for the next year is a car's windshield and rearview mirror, the function of each and the size compared to the other. And the rearview mirror is obviously for looking back. And he said, and that's fun because as we look back, we've been 28-2 the last 2 seasons. We won the ACC. We won the national championship. But the much bigger picture is what is ahead and the work that needs to be done. And this is really fun to think back, to reminisce. I can wax nostalgically. Of all the people that have made such investments in my life and in this life of this community over the years, it's fun to look back, but the bigger picture is always the future. And our focus must always be what can still be. For as great as Hearst has been through the generations in its rich heritage and history, for Hearst, the best is yet to be.